Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
He's at war with woke.
Joe Concha
thinks liberals are a joke.
Joe Concha.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition, sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Here's Joe Concha.
Yes, it's the Killers. I think that's the last concert I ever saw. Once you have kids, you don't go to concerts much anymore, unless you go to a Coldplay concert with your mistress. Outside of that, ain't a lot of opportunities. Some at Madison Square Garden, one of the great bands of the 21st century. Anyway, breaking my back to try to explain the Zoran Mamdani regime era, which already, what are we in now? About 6.5 weeks in, and this guy is already showing that just like trust me, if he wasn't married, and I guess she has a boyfriend, not too sure, but boy, talk about a match made in heaven. Mamdani AOC, that would be a power couple in the Democratic Socialist circles for the ages. Anyway, she showed in Munich this week. We'll talk about that more in a second. She is not ready for prime time, not ready for any time for that matter, certainly not ready to be president. Well, Zoran Mamdani also showing that, okay, I never had a job before in any real capacity, and now I'm going to try to run one of the most complex cities in the world, the financial capital of the world, ironically enough. And this guy just doesn't have a clue on how to pay for all the things that he has promised outside of raising taxes and having the rich pay their fair share and all this crap that we've been listening to from Democrats for decades. The problem that Zoran has is that he needs money from Kathy Hochul in terms of her taxpayers. In other words, he wants taxes to go up, not just on people in New York City, on everybody in New York, right? Like Albany and Buffalo. And I could go through 1,000 towns in terms of their names, Westchester. And Hochul has said, no, I'm not going to raise taxes for taxes' sake, not for your vanity. Right? And by the way, remember when Hochul actually, endorsed Mamdani, and then Mamdani didn't turn around and endorse her back. Maybe some personal bad blood there as well. But now here's the problem, right? I'll read this right from the New York Times. Mayor Zoran Mamdani on Tuesday proposed to raise property tax rates in New York City by nearly 10%. Remember, this is already the second highest tax rate in the country. New York is behind California. New Jersey is right there as well. Let's continue. It's a measure he is casting as a last resort to be deployed if he cannot persuade Governor Kathy Hochul to raise income taxes on the wealthy. So if he's not going to get it one way, not steal your money one way, he will try to steal it another. Again, I can't wait. Just give me 2 or 3 months when actual polls come out, credible ones. I want to see what his approval's at, because I think there's 40% in New York who probably for at least the honeymoon period that he's in now won't leave him because, boy, he smiles a lot and he's young and he's a socialist and we like all those things and he's foreign and he checks off all these boxes except, actually having any experience doing anything. That's kind of the most important box. But I want to see where he's at because he is heading to de Blasio territory. I think de Blasio got down to 18% at one point. Brandon Johnson in Chicago is at 6%. Karen Bass in Los Angeles is at something like 30. These are not good numbers. And remember, these are Democrat cities. These are deep blue cities. It's not like there's a lot of red in terms of voters that could come in there and bring down your approval rating. This is what he is dealing with at this point. He doesn't have the money to pay for any of this stuff. And when none of it happens, when you don't get your free busing, and right now, bus fares are only up and they're running slower. Okay, fine. First 6 or 7 weeks. But still, he's not going to get that. He's certainly, sure as hell, not going to get free childcare for all. That's $10 billion. And that's what they projected to be. You know what that cost is going to be. Just like Obamacare, like everything else, supposed to be one cost, and then boom, oh, it's triple, it's quadruple what we thought it would be. Big problem for Zoran. But he is changing the culture around New York City. So let's see. This morning I got up and I'm like, hey, let me do a little segment on WABC here in New York and for this nationally syndicated show across the country. And I couldn't even speak over the noise. So I wanted to do this outside. I wanted to do some man on the street interviews, but that's the noise. That's what I'll call it. I guess it's music. Actually, all right. It's a prayer music. I couldn't speak over. It was too loud. This is cut number 9. You're going to an idea. This is what people are hearing throughout New York friggin' city 25 years after 9/11. Cut number 9, go. Wait, what the? Am I in Baghdad? Is this Amman? Am I in Tehran? Damascus? Where the hell am I? This is New York City. This is what we hear in several boroughs now. All right. Have a little trouble sleeping. Was out a little late last night. And 6 o'clock in the morning, sun rising. This is what is being blared in more and more places in New York City. And look, I'm all for religious freedom. That's fine. But again, this was the place that was attacked on 9/11 by Al-Qaeda, Islamic extremists. And can you imagine these guys looking up from hell right now? Nope, 72 virgins, not happening. All right. And being like, wow, I guess maybe what we did was kind of successful. Because you would think that the city would learn that maybe you don't want to elect a guy like Zoran Mamdani, who is a profound anti-Semite, who has called the New York City Police Department, remember how many NYPD officers died that day, has called them anti-queer and racist. Not a couple, all of them. And this guy's running the city right now, or trying to, has no idea what he's doing. And now more and more we're hearing Muslim prayer blaring. You want to go to a mosque, knock yourself out. No problemo on that. But to play that sort of prayer where it just, again, this invades everybody's lives. If you're in an apartment building, you're walking to work. I'm sorry. That's a whole bowl of wrong. It's profoundly insulting and disgusting. But that's Zoran's man in New York. Remember, there was a guy last week, he's on video, and he's actually attempting to kill a New York City police officer. Got a long knife in his hand. The officers went to his apartment to arrest him. And this guy wasn't going to go quietly. And 9 times the officer says, drop the knife. And he doesn't drop the knife. And he keeps coming forward at the cop. So what does he do? He shoots him. The guy ends up in the hospital and he's going to be okay. What does Mamdani do? What does the mayor do? Not what Rudy Giuliani would have done. Not what Bloomberg would have done. This guy, even Eric Adams, visits the so-called victim in the hospital and doesn't even have one good word to say about the cop. And then says that the victim, in this case, the guy with the knife coming at a New York City police officer, does not belong in handcuffs. He just needs help. What kind of help? Like how to drop a knife help? Is there a class in that? I'm just, the fact that we are here, if you told me this in 2001, that this is where New York would be right now, I'd say you're crazy. And sure enough, nope, nothing is too crazy in this world anymore. Meanwhile, Jesse Jackson passed away. We, of course, know Jesse Jackson from 1984, 1988, ran for president, had a pretty good run. I mean, he was the first major black candidate to run for president. And there were times where you thought, again, I was very young at the time, but I've read about this, where he was doing pretty well, ultimately fell short. But he and Donald Trump, now President Trump, have always had an excellent relationship. Now, maybe Jackson, due to party pressure over the last couple of years, he's not going to be singing Kumbaya with Trump and visiting the White House. But here's what Jackson had to say about Trump in 1999. So this is 11 years after his first presidential run, about how Trump actually, good guy. Cut number 10, go.
In terms of reaching out and being inclusive, he's done that too. And created for many people a comfort zone when I ran for the presidency in 84 and 88. and many others thought it was either laughable or something to avoid, he came to our business meeting here in New York because he has this sense of the curious and a will to risk to make things better. And so aside from all of his style and his pizzazz, he's a serious person.
I will tell you, a large percentage of the people, and especially in construction, that are building these great jobs are Black and minorities, and I'm very proud of it. We have close to 25%, and I think the number's going up. And they do a great job. There are no better builders than we have in New York, and a big percentage of that is Black and minority folks. So I just want to thank everybody in the room for being here. I look forward to some questions. And then I don't know how we're ever going to leave this building today, because if you look outside, it is terrible. But we'll figure a way. There's always a way. And thank you, Jesse, and congratulations.
You know, it's always very interesting to listen to these cuts now of Trump with Oprah Winfrey, for example, and how in awe she was of him before she called him Hitler last year and campaigned for Kamala Harris for a cool $1 million, of course, to do an interview with her. Which again, if Oprah is this, independent journalist, what does her production company have to be paid $1 million for to interview the Democratic nominee at the time? And, even if you're not an independent, serious, nonpartisan journalist, wouldn't you still make it on the House as far as, well, you're going to defeat Hitler? I guess maybe I won't charge for this interview $1 million like Oprah's production company did with Kamala. Interesting. But Oprah, for a while seemed to very much like Donald Trump, as did Hillary and Bill Clinton, for that matter, who we'll be talking about very soon, by the way, as far as the Epstein mess that now is more on the Democrats' doorstep than anywhere close to Donald Trump, where, again, I'll say this a billion times about that before. Actually, I'll save it for later. But, I think you know where I'm going to go with this. If Democrats had anything on Trump, they would have used it a good 10 to 11 years ago when he was running for president, right? When Barack Obama was in office, right? Like, Obama wouldn't weaponize anything like the IRS against conservatives, right? So if he had the goods on Trump, probably would have used it, right? Anyway, we'll be talking about that in a little bit. But I think the point is that Trump went on Colbert, went on Kimmel, went on Fallon, no problems, because they never thought he was going to win. And then when he did, then suddenly he's this fascist who must be stopped. And that's that. And Jesse Jackson is a prime example of that, where Trump has always reached across the aisle and was kind of a Democrat even at one point. I think in Trump's case, I don't think he really cares about party per se. That's why MAGA is MAGA. That's why you don't hear him talk about being a Republican that much. He's MAGA, started that movement. And that's more of a populist movement that appeals to blue collar Democrat workers more than anything else, right? We saw it last year with unions, for example, during that election, 2024, where Teamsters and United Auto Workers and service workers in Nevada, U.S. Steel, rank and file went for Trump. That used to be like the Bill Clinton coalition, and even Obama to a certain extent, I guess, since he won states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But the point is that Trump has always been a guy about succeeding. And I don't think he really cares too much about the letter next to your name. That's why currently Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the head of HHS and Tulsi Gabbard is DNI as far as Director of National Intelligence. Let's see, both ran for president as Democrats in this decade. Just throwing that out there. Anyway, this is Joe Concha. This is Concha at Night. Back with so much more in just a moment.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition.
Joe Concha.
Sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition, sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Here's Joe Concha.
The Killers probably have like 10 excellent songs. I don't know if they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. When you look at who's made the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame lately, I'm thinking that, yeah, they qualify. I know it's like not the longest resume, since the Rolling Stones we're talking about, but I mean, you want to talk about 10 excellent songs and some real feeling to them. Old school rock and roll. If these guys aren't in Cleveland in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, let's talk about Robert Duvall for a second. Passed away, of course, at age 95. And you see the outpouring here. I mean, one of the most respected actors maybe ever. And you look at the body of work, certainly that's for sure. And the fact that he turned down Godfather 3, I always found interesting because I think that was the beginning of the end of that movie. In other words, you look at Rotten Tomatoes, which tells you like audience scores in terms of what they thought of movies. Godfather 1, 97% approval. Godfather 2, 96% approval. So essentially the same. How about Godfather 3? How did that do? Oops, 66% approval. You're talking like a 30-point drop. I think not having Duvall in that particular movie certainly played a big role there. And Coppola's daughter just being insufferable in almost every scene. Andy Garcia was actually quite good. The point is, here is Robert Duvall, Bobby, talking about why he turned down Godfather 3. This is cut whatever. Go.
Well, I think everybody did it for money. I mean, why wait 15 years to do a sequel or whatever you call the third one? You know, and they waited that long, so obviously it must be for money, because why wait that long? So when there have been a lot of stories, and what I've told certain people, here's the real deal. This is the way it happened. If they offer somebody 5 times what they offer me, that's totally unacceptable. If they offered them 2 to 3 times more, which they didn't, that would be acceptable but not ideal, but I would accept it. But they didn't do that. If they offer 5 times, then that's unacceptable, and that's what happened. So it did boil down to economics.
So Pacino was going to get 5 times more?
Yes.
And
I felt it was, why even do it? Coppola said because I didn't want to do secondary parts anymore, which is not true. And that I wanted a great big bunch of money, which is true to a point. I just wanted some slice of the pie. Otherwise, why do it? Because everybody was doing it for money. And when you see the movie, it is not as good as the first 2. I don't care what anybody says. It's not as good as the first 2.
It's not even close to the first 2. And he's right. He goes, it's a sequel, I guess. There was zero connection from Godfather 1, Godfather 2 to Godfather 3. Just a whole different story. And it's like what Mel Brooks once said. He said when he did Spaceballs, and he's playing a character called Yogurt. Anyway, he says, I'm sure we'll all see each other again for Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money. Like, that's all it is half the time with sequels. And Duvall actually just wanted $1 million. In 1990, you're Bobby Duvall. You get $1 million, like, easily. Especially with Pacino. Obviously, he's Michael Corleone, but geez. I mean, Pacino got $5 million. So, I don't know. Can he get 20% of that? And they wouldn't give it to him. And Duvall was only paid $36,000. $36,000 for the original Godfather. But, without him in Godfather 3, just wasn't remotely close to being a great movie. And maybe it wouldn't have been anyway, and I think he knew that. Anyway, Bobby Duvall, 95 years old. Obviously, you are missed. This is Joe Concha. This is Concha at Night. Back with more in just a moment.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition.
Joe Concha.
Sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition, sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Here's Joe Concha.
All right, let's bring in Theo Wold. He was a former Assistant Attorney General and former Deputy Assistant to President Trump for domestic policy. I certainly want to talk about the SAVE Act with Mr. Wold. Theo, thanks for joining us for the first time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Joe. It's good to be with you.
Of course, and I appreciate your patience. So I want to get your top line thoughts on this. As far as the SAVE Act, Fox News poll, 84% of Americans support showing an ID when you vote, just like you do when you, I don't know, board a plane like I did today, or when you rent a car, or a thousand different examples of this with dozens upon dozens. Basically, every advanced country requires this. Democrats are obviously against it. In the end, if this fails in the Senate, okay, and it looks like it will, because you need 60 votes. You know how this works. There's only 53 on the Republican side. So is there a legal option here? Can this go to the Supreme Court somehow to say, hey, look, this is wrong. We need obviously ID for voter integrity or something along those lines. I'm talking to you like a guy who obviously never went to law school, but can you bring us down that road? Are there any options for the Trump administration if this fails in the Senate?
Yeah, unfortunately, the way that the Constitution lays out the claims for election law at the federal level, the best option for the Trump administration, if this does not move forward in the U.S. Senate, would be to take it to the states and for each state to pick up the mantle of imposing a citizenship verification requirement in state election law. Otherwise, the president could try through an executive order. It would be challenged. And I think a lot of the process leading up to a Supreme Court intervention would have a lot of federal judges basically saying, nice try. This isn't something you can do through unilateral executive action. You got to have a statute here. So it would be very tricky. And this is just an unfortunate part of how the Senate is currently constituted. It's not only that Republicans are short a 60-seat majority, but there are a lot of things that they could do short of nuking the entire filibuster. They could resume what we all call the talking filibuster. Everyone's seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. In order to filibuster back in the day, you actually had to hold the floor. And they don't do that anymore. They just do it by procedure. So there's a lot of rules that Republicans in the Senate could do, but you got a lot of old dogs like McConnell and some of those folks, some of the moderates, who don't want to change the procedures of the Senate. So we're stuck in this impasse.
And we're talking to Theo Wold. You could follow him at Real Theo Wold on X. And that's the thing here. If Republicans may be forced to blow up the filibuster, right? I mean, then you only need a majority, obviously. The problem when you do that is the Pandora's box that could open up as far as Democrats getting back into power. And then suddenly you have a Supreme Court that looks like more of like an NBA roster, right? Forget 9, we're going to 12, or, maybe even like a baseball roster where we have a 25 Supreme Court justices, and then you may have another situation where Puerto Rico and DC become states, and that's automatically basically 4 more Democratic senators and perhaps permanent control of that chamber. And I could go down the line as far as all these different things that could happen if one party just needs a majority, I should say, in order to pass things. But that's something that John Thune and the president and others need to figure out at this point. I want to go to this because I'm a guy who follows media often and talk about it a lot on Fox News. But we had a situation on Monday night where Stephen Colbert had on a Democratic Senate candidate from Texas. And because of I guess there's a couple of different ways to put it, I suppose, but you need to give equal time to competing political candidates under FCC rules. And forever, Stephen Colbert, we're talking about hundreds of Democrat guests, especially candidates. And we're talking like the very top, whether it's Kamala Harris, Democratic nominee, all the way through like Bernie Sanders has been on Colbert something like 21 times since Colbert took over for Letterman. Elizabeth Warren's been on 16 times. It dwarfs the appearances from like Seth Rogen and George Clooney and Julia Roberts, like actual stars. I guess the thing here is that we had a situation last night where the FCC, at least in Texas, would not show the interview that Colbert did with James Talrico, who's running against Jasmine Crockett for at least on the Democratic side before they would take on a Republican in a red state. And now the left is completely up in arms here, saying that, well, Trump just wanted to block this interview because this candidate is such a threat and can win Texas. He's the next Beto O'Rourke that they decided to take him off the air, and now they're playing the victim card. Explain to the listeners a little bit more about the federal law that's existed since the early 1930s that has required broadcast media to give equal time to competing political candidates. Colbert is not doing here. Their argument, I guess, is that, well, he's a comedian, and comedians, they're just doing entertainment. Well, this show has not been entertainment for years. It's been a political super PAC, basically, for Democrats. The only Republican that's ever appeared on it in the last couple of years has been named Liz Cheney, which many would argue probably not your typical Republican. So I'll give you the floor here. But do they have an argument here as far as, hey, we're just a comedy show, we shouldn't have to give equal time, or does it apply here?
No, I actually think, Joe, something really ingenious is happening here. And it's another example of how the left is just 8, 9, 10 paces ahead of the right in thinking about ways around the law. The Communications Act has been on the books since 1932. It's a long, time-honored federal law. And as you noted, it requires broadcast media to give equal time to competing political views. Now,
like
I know
CBS.
For most, exactly, like CBS, ABC, NBC. So a lot of your listeners, this is true for a lot of Americans. We don't really know the difference anymore between broadcast media or, a simulcast on your, whatever vehicle you're using, Roku, Netflix. So the average consumer thinks of it as just like NBC has all kinds of streaming services. NBC is no different than, this service over here. Distinguishing between them is kind of difficult. So what Colbert essentially wanted to do is he wanted to platform Talarico. He doesn't want to platform Jasmine Crockett. He wants to give Talarico the best shot, not only in the primary, but against his Republican opponent. So he films Talarico, but he releases the video only online. And then everyone who sees it online, they see the studio set up, they see this, they think it's the Tonight Show with Colbert, and they think, well, this is great. And so Colbert, who, as you know, has virtually no TV viewers anyway, he reaches a wide audience, the same audience he's going to get no matter what, because his most success is on the streaming content he posts on YouTube. And then they get to gin up all of this hostility and anger that somehow Trump stopped Stephen Colbert. This is another example of Trump's censorship of the media. And they get to generate even more eyeballs for this clip. I actually think this is a really ingenious way for the left to get around the 1932 Communications Act, which requires, as you noted, if you're going to have a Democrat on, you got to have a Republican and vice versa. Instead, what they've done is they've created a made-for-the-internet clip that is now going viral because they at the same time got to attack President Trump as the cause of all of this.
Wow, that's such a great point. You're right. It is a loophole. It is a workaround. Obviously, no one's tuning in to see Colbert already, right? He's a very distant second to my colleague, Greg Gutfeld, and he's going off CBS in May. Why CBS kept him around until then so he could pull this stuff is just unbelievable to me. But to have on this guy that 99.9% of the country outside of Texas has never heard of before, and he's the featured guest, so to speak, this has gone viral. Now more people know James Talarico's name, certainly. But you're right. I think in a world now where you don't need a studio anymore per se, and what I mean is like satellite trucks and broadcasting on a CBS, NBC, ABC. Now you could just create like a streaming option, and you don't need. It's almost cost free. And we even saw it with the Super Bowl. As far as Bad Bunny, but then Turning Point USA says, all right, we're going to do our own halftime show, and attracted somewhere around 7 million viewers. So, it's interesting the way you explain that. And again, now Colbert gets to play the victim, just like Jimmy Kimmel and Don Lemon, who I want to ask you about next. And we're talking to Theo Wold. Theo was deputy assistant to President Trump and also a former Solicitor General of the state of Idaho. So, Theo, with Don Lemon, I mean, this seems pretty open and shut for me. But again, I am not a lawyer, but all I know is that we have somebody who purports to be a journalist who flew out from New York, somehow knew the one church where a storming was going to take place by a mob to break up this service, to get in the face of parishioners, and even the pastor himself, as Don Lemon did. In this case, Lemon told the cameraman to shut off footage at a certain point in the parking lot as to not give away what was happening. Lemon interviewed the head of this mob, giving this person a kiss in the cheek when it was done, and bought coffee and donuts for these folks before they stormed the church. Lemon obviously arrested under the KKK Act and under the FACE Act. Does this have any legs, or will this just be like everything else where Don Lemon gets a bunch of publicity and nothing happens to him for clearly breaking the law?
No, I mean, I actually think there are legs here. And the problem isn't exactly what happened on camera, what we saw from Don Lemon when he was in the sanctuary of that church. It's what he did beforehand. And the violations that were brought against Don Lemon in the indictment are for essentially the interference of the civil rights of folks of religious faith to practice and worship their religion without interference in their sanctuary. 18 U.S.C. 241 is the federal code here that Lemon's been cited under. And the thinking here is, for a long time, there was a lot of press on this at the time of his arrest. For a long time, the left has used this law, one of which is called the FACE Act, and it's essentially been a tool for the left to prevent even silent protesters from a gathering outside of abortion clinics and interfering with the right of folks to access abortion services in those clinics. There have been any number of essentially harmless, innocent Americans arrested under the FACE Act, including under President Biden in a couple of midnight raids of private citizens' homes. So same act here now being applied in a religious context, which is the interference with religious worship. And the problem for Don Lemon is going to be that he had conversations, he met with some of these BLM leaders there in the Twin Cities prior to them actually deploying to these church sites. And he was made aware of their plans, which was essentially to interfere with the worship, to surround the Sunday school services and to, berate the children. All of these things are criminal conduct. And Don Lemon not only acquiesced to it, but he, helped them plan the deployment and then their activities in these churches. So in many ways, the way you can think about it for your listeners is he's kind of a co-conspirator, and that's not what he's being charged with, and that's not how the law works here, but he's essentially actively participating in a criminal conspiracy to interfere with the civil rights of innocent worshipers.
And he, of course, is the former deputy assistant to President Trump. We'll definitely have you back, Theo. Thanks so much, and good luck with father of 5. I have 2. I'm on vacation right now, kind of a working vacation. 5, I don't know how you do it, but God bless you, sir.
Duct tape and WD-40, Joe. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Well said. All right. Theo Wold, everybody. We'll definitely have him back. And this is Joe Concha. This is Concha at Night. We wrap this puppy up in just a moment.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition.
Joe Concha.
Sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
Time is valuable. That's why Lowe's Blueprint Takeoffs turn blueprints into quotes faster. Bring us your plans, and we'll generate itemized material lists to make quoting easier so you can get back to building. Plus, at the Lowe's Pro Desk, you get access to thousands of building materials not sold in store. And when your order's ready, we'll deliver everything to the job site. Improving is easy at Lowe's.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition, sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Here's Joe Concha.
Coming out of my cage, and I'm doing just fine. All right. Just fine. All right, I'm not going to sing The Killers all night. You guys are here for content, baby. Even though, if you've never listened to The Killers, all I do is invite you to download any one of their first 2 albums, if we're still calling them albums. It's that good, and it has staying power. I mean, that song you just heard came out, I believe, in 2003, and here we are 23 years later, and they're still cranking it at college football games where 100,000 people at the University of Michigan sing along to that song, and they weren't alive when it came out, all the students there. So just saying, The Killers, they are our band of the night, which I think will make a nightly theme, producer Kevin and Elias and Phil, or whoever is behind the glass that particular night. I will never run out of bands. That I do know. Anyway, running out of material in a hurry is AOC, because she went to Munich. We've talked about this on the show before. You've seen the clips everywhere by now, going viral for all the wrong reasons. It's like it's like Biden. This thought just hit me. She's finally been exposed. I think she's been exposed for a while. If you watch Fox News, or if you listen to WABC in New York, or other conservative outlets, and I hate the fact that it's a red-blue thing, she is profoundly an idiot. I don't know how else to put this. And I would say the same thing about Don Lemon, so let's not turn this into a sex thing. okay? Or I'd say the same thing about Jim Acosta. So let's not turn it into a race thing. I'm just saying that this person has no business being a lawmaker. And there's talk of her being president of the United States. She's second in polling in some polls. It's like Newsom AOC or Kamala AOC Newsom or some sort of combination of that. All three are not good options. But in Munich, that answer she had on China and Taiwan, what if China went into Taiwan? What would you do? And I wrote it down. I spoke about it on Fox. She said, or the first 7 times in the first 12 seconds of that clip. It is the first time she has even contemplated that scenario. And she was exposed. And then she was exposed for saying that we shouldn't go into Venezuela because they're south of the equator, except, they're not by, a lot. So that wasn't good. Or when she said that, Marco Rubio, he's such a moron, doesn't know what he's talking about. Horses didn't come, American cowboys didn't come from Spain. I think African slaves want to have a word about that. No, actually, horses did come from Spain into Mexico when the Aztec Empire, they invaded and conquered and then basically set up shop. They breed a whole bunch of horses. Eventually, it led to the American cowboy and obviously the iconic images that you see with American cowboys on horses. So yeah, the whole cowboy horse thing originated in Spain, and she thought that she was dunking on Marco Rubio, and obviously that didn't go well. And then said that, Israel committed genocide in Gaza. And she said the genocide thing in Germany, which literally carried out a genocide in World War II under the Nazis. So bad conference for AOC in Munich. So then my friend Clay Travis decided to put together this back and forth, which is hilarious, between AOC and the winner of the Miss America pageant from South Carolina. And this poor girl, probably like 19, 20 years old, is forced to talk about her worldview on affairs in the Middle East and just in general in terms of what could bring peace to the world. And it doesn't go well. But when you listen to AOC, there's almost no difference in terms of intelligence level or knowing what the hell you're talking about. This is cut number 1. Go.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that
I personally believe that U.S. Americans are unable to do so.
This is such a I think that
people out there in our nation don't have maps, and I believe that our education, such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere such as, and
this is
it's a tie so far, definitely a tie.
This is of course a very long-standing
today, Junior,
of the United States.
And the U.S. should help the U.S. or should help South Africa and should help the Iraq and the Asian countries.
And our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
Yeah, I got a tie here. I mean, this is a dead heat. Photo finish. Would you take Miss South Carolina and her answer at a Miss America pageant or AOC's answer in Munich on foreign policy and world affairs? I don't know. Flip a coin. Either way, not good, because the gal who won Miss South Carolina in the Miss America pageant, isn't running for president, isn't a congresswoman, isn't seen by MSNBC and CNN as some sort of savior for the Democratic Party. Remember, CNN gave AOC a primetime documentary called Being AOC. Why? And then MSNBC gives her town halls all the time to pontificate against, about XYZ, especially when it comes to climate change. Remember, in 2019, she said Earth had 12 years. That was it. We're all doomed. And oh, by the way, all you young people out there, don't have kids. Don't bother. They're all going to die anyway in an inferno of heat due to climate change and the climate crisis. Well, that means we got 5 years to go. So get that bucket list out and get cracking, people, because AOC says the world will end by 2031. Oh, boy. I was more of a drummer and a bassist than lead singer. But anyway, thanks so much for tuning in tonight. We're back tomorrow night, Wednesday night, 9 p.m. in New York on WABC and on stations across the country. Until then, I got 2 words for you. Bye-bye. Bye.
This is the Joe Concha Show, weekday edition.
Joe Concha.
Sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
The children of our nation know little to nothing about 9/11, but the Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Institute is righting this wrong by helping teachers educate kids in kindergarten through 12th grade. Their nonfiction, first-person accounts are told through videos and the Discovering Heroes book series. The Institute offers full, scripted curriculum units with background for teachers, a speakers bureau for classrooms, a mobile exhibit that's an interactive museum with 9/11 artifacts and FDNY guides. Donate $11 a month and amplify your impact by donating your car or land. Go to T2T.org.